Today is Friday, September 29th, 2017. It's about 2 weeks after my 3-day track weekend. I wanted to talk about everything that happened over my 3-day track weekend and fill you guys in on everything I experienced. So it started out Saturday morning. I woke up at, I think, 4:30 a.m. and I drove about 3 hours to South Haven, Michigan for Gingerman. Met up with all the guys, rode around a little bit in the APR Stage 2 tuned Golf R. After that, I got into my car. I was doing some pretty easy laps. At first, I was getting some laps at about just over 2 minutes, but then by Sunday afternoon, I did get that down to about a 1:55, and I made a video about that if you want to check that out. But other than that, I rode along with a Cayman GT4, which was awesome. He got like a 150 while I was in the passenger seat, and I was able to drive one of the guys I went with, his Porsche Carrera 4S, which was the first time I had driven a mid-engine car on track or really hard. I mean, I've driven Porsches before on the street, but never to a point where I was reaching the limits of the car at all. So it was interesting to me to feel how the car is when you're braking, kind of going into a corner and you have all that weight in the back. At first I thought, wow, this feels like it's going to kick out, but then I got a little bit more confident, and I guess I kind of just started to understand how far I could take the car into doing something like that. And I wanted to drive the Golf R that we brought. That thing is just so fast. I've driven it before, like I said, on the street and kind of put my foot into it, but it would have been a great opportunity on the track. But unfortunately, on Sunday, I rode along with someone else that drove it, and he was driving it as hard as he could, getting a pretty good time. I think he got like a 1:48. And after those like 7 laps, my stomach was just upside down, and I had to take about 45 minutes to sit down. Then it was lunchtime, so we packed them up with the Golf R, the Porsche, and the 458. And then after lunch, I went back out with my car, and I was starting to get after it, probably more so than I should have. And they say with track days, it's not if you go off, but a matter of when, and this weekend that finally happened to me. So I went off in turn 11 at Gingerman into South Beach. I don't know if that's what they call it all the time, but there was a lady who drove over and asked me if I visited South Beach, and I said, I guess so, yeah. So that was kind of scary. I went off in a straight line, fortunately, so I just put it into second gear and was able to make it out of the sand trap, and at that point I had to do the rest of the 95% of the track to go off. So I got the car up to about 60-70 miles per hour, and there was a pretty bad wobble. So I was like, oh great, did I bend the chassis or bend a wheel, or is a tire messed up, something like that. So I kept it down to about 50 to avoid that wobble, and fortunately when I stopped at the start-stop line, I guess there was a bunch of sand that fell out of my back right wheel. Then after that happened, I walked around the car, made sure everything looked good, and then I did one more lap to make sure the vibration was gone before I drove over to Chicago, and yeah, everything was fine. So I was like, yeah, I think I pushed the car hard enough today. I'm just gonna stop here. But I got a good amount of track time in. I mean, I probably did 50 laps in my car, did about 15 in the Porsche, and I guess that's all I drove. But by the middle of the day Sunday, it was basically an open track. There might have been 1 or 2 more cars out there, but it was awesome having an entire 2.2 mile racetrack basically yourself, just at your own will, going on, coming off. And I don't know how many more experiences I'm gonna have like that, but that was pretty unique, I thought. So then after I left Gingerman, I drove about 3.5 hours over to Chicago to spend the night with some friends. I surprised my best buddy over there, And I was just so tired from the last 2 days that I was falling asleep on their couch at like 9 o'clock. So actually, I got to back up a little bit. Saturday night, after we were done with our first day at the track, we went over to one of the guys' second homes in Michigan, and we got ready to go out to the lake. So we took his boat out to Lake Michigan and we went swimming. Then we came back to their place, had a great meal made by his wife, and after that we were hanging out for a little bit, and then at about 11 o'clock we decided to go out to Saugatuck and go out for some drinks. So started off the night by downing about 3 shots, and then I was like, all right, let's go. So we went out there and we met up with 2 bachelorette parties that we knew were going to be happening. So I guess that was kind of neat. Then we didn't get to bed till about 2 a.m. Woke up at about 7:30, went back to the racetrack and got back at it. So now we finished Sunday. I sleep until about 6 a.m., which was nice. Got about 8 full hours of sleep. Then I drove over to Autobahn. It was about an hour away from there. And there was heavier traffic than I thought there would be, which kind of sucked. Google thought it was going to be pretty easy going, Google Maps, but no, there was a little bit of traffic. So I get to Autobahn, go to the driver's meeting. I do my first 2 sessions by myself, and I was in the green group, so the newer people to track days there at Autobahn. There were a couple cars that were pretty slow. We had some long conga lines of like 8 cars that were getting held up by the one car that was in front of me. I think it was like a Mazda 3, and they probably just weren't very confident with the track. So I'd say maybe out of those 2 sessions, I got half of my second session was okay, where I was actually able to open the car up and start putting some power down and stringing together a decent lap. But then I was getting low on fuel, so I went off the campus and went to a nearby fuel station just to get some cheaper gas and, not pay their inflated prices, whatever. And I was kind of listening to my front brakes, and sure enough, by the time I got back, I was just like, no, it's hitting the springs or whatever, the indicators, wear indicators. I was like, yeah, my front brakes are gone. I can't go back out there. So I was talking to one of the guys if he thought maybe I should try to replace them there on the spot or just call it a day. And we just determined 3 sessions left. By the time you get them done, you're probably only going to be able to do 1 session. Then I wouldn't get home until like 9 o'clock that night, and I have to work the next day and clean up a bunch of stuff. So I took off and I went home at about 2 or 3. Drove about 3 hours or 150 miles home with no front brakes, so it was a lot of engine braking and hand braking. But I made it back, and the car was pretty filthy. I mean, I still have a little bit of sand in here. I need to clean that out, but fortunately I was able to clean the outside, get off all the rubber marks from the rocker panels in the front, I guess just kicking up a bunch of rubber and that type of thing. Retrospecting on the weekend now, I think I enjoyed it a lot more than I realized at the time, because at the time we were just in the moment, just be like, okay, yeah, this is what we're doing. I mean, we're here, we're at the track. Yeah, this is great, all the guys hanging out. But I don't think I really understood the magnitude of like how cool that was until afterwards. So I guess now it's back to reality, and I have replaced the front and rear brakes. I made a video about that. Talk about what was difficult and all that, so feel free to check that out. But I guess until next time, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.